On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, GSA's OneGov effort makes one CIO excited. A cyber shot in the arm for the whole federal government, and the Army's intelligence operation hits the innovation easy button. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. The General Services Administration has more than a dozen deals now for lower prices on products and services through its OneGov initiative. GSA officials say they welcome other companies to join OneGov. Robert Costello is Chief Information Officer at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. At the Billington Cybersecurity Summit, he says there's a lot for CIOs to like about OneGov.
First and foremost, it's really great as a Chief Information Officer in the Federal Civilian Executive Branch to be able to work directly with the OEMs and the cloud providers and the software providers on several initiatives. So as these OneGov initiatives are being announced by GSA, I'm ensuring that my office is stepping right up, looking at them, see how it applies to our technology, and then embracing it for how we can modernize very quickly. We've had very encouraging discussions with Amazon, Microsoft, and several others on their OneGov work, and then being able to start consuming it to modernize our systems, improve our cybersecurity, but most importantly, improve our effectiveness so that we're delivering good quality solutions for the people that have to operate CISA systems and ensuring that we're spending the American people's money wisely.
It's interesting to me that the first thing that a tech guy would want to talk to me about is an acquisition issue. I think people don't think about the synchronization among all of those things in the C-suite often enough.
I think that's a really good point. And I was kind of joking with some mentees the other day. And, you know, when I was coming up, I always wanted to be a CIO. I'm like, that's got to be the job that it is. I didn't realize I would also have to understand acquisition, programmatics, the budgeting cycle. Like we often budget, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years when you get into that type of programming, that future looking initiatives.
Yeah.
So a big part of my job is actually contracting, acquisition, ensuring that we're running those programs efficiently, effectively, that they're delivering value. And that's a total partnership. I always call our contractors partners because we are in a contract together. We have to fulfill both sides of it. But most importantly, we have to make sure as the payers of the contract that we're getting exactly what we've paid for and that everyone understands how the contract is performing.
What's the benefit that you get in that direct dialogue that you talked about with the vendors that you're working with on OneGov, through OneGov?
Absolutely. I think it all comes down to, no matter how much we talk about technology, AI is the next thing. There's nothing better than what we're doing right here and now. And I believe that's in business relationships too. The more steps between you and your supplier can cause problems. It can cause opaqueness, confusion. So this ability to engage directly, I think helps them understand our requirements better. It helps things move a lot faster.
You used a word there too that triggered another thought in my mind. You called them suppliers rather than vendors, and it strikes me you have greater visibility, I bet, into the supply chain that they're delivering to you, and whatever service or product they're delivering to you, you have greater visibility there. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, absolutely. I actually was on a supply chain conversation earlier, and it wasn't about how do we do this in a technological fashion, but how do we build partnerships and trust between the consumers and the suppliers and the people that rely on the products that are delivered. So I absolutely think that, open conversation is one of the most important things. It's why I'm super excited. My workforce, through several changes recently, one of the things we've noticed first and foremost is being in person drives innovation, drives a different type of accountability and understanding of what other people are working on. And I believe that's in business relationships as well, too. The more we talk, hopefully the more we actually understand what's going on in both worlds and can, work together better.
All right, different kind of supply chain I want to ask you about, and it's my favorite acronym in government, the Software Bill of Materials, the SBOM.
Absolutely.
Where do you stand on working on those kinds of things and ascertaining that you've got one for each thing that you're working on at CISA?
That's a really great question. And I'd love to be able to sit here and say I'm the CIO that figured it all out. I haven't. It's a complex problem. And I think there are correlations to what's happened in other supply chains as we've matured them through big events. The pharmaceutical supply chain is rightly so very strict. We often, I wake up in the morning of that age now, I got a few pills to take. I don't question that those pills didn't go through a process to be manufactured, potentially enter the country through our Customs and Border Protection and the FDA. There's a lot of controls on manufacturing and that process. We understand the ingredient list. What we're trying to do with software is very similar, so that you understand how your software was built, the provenance of that software, and through open source as well too. Sometimes your supplier may not exist anymore. Maybe you're using something that, Bob Costello developed 10 years ago, and you really like that software library. Bob stopped maintaining it 8 years ago, but it's still working in your system. That's all part of the big complexity of SBOMs, or software bill of materials. We did just recently, earlier in September at CISA, release some guidance around this, and that was actually co-sealed with 18 other government agencies as well as international partners. And I think it's a great reference guide around, understanding SBOM, and also just, how we apply supply chain to the tech universe.
You're at a really interesting pivot point, I think, in government, Bob, because you're the CIO, obviously, of CISA, so you're responsible for their technical operations. But since you're inside CISA, you see things that are valuable to technology and security leaders all across government. What kind of perspectives does that give you, do you think, on the problems, not just that you have, not just the challenges you have, but that your colleagues all throughout the CIO community and CIO Council are trying to work on right now?
That's a really great question. And at first, when I've been at CISA now officially 4 years, last week of August. And one of the things that I really try for my office, and we talked about this at several recent conferences. We were out at Black Hat, Chris Butera and I, explaining what CISA's been up to. One of my big motivators is that my office should serve as an example to other CIO offices. That doesn't mean that me and my team are always getting it right, or we have no problems. I have problems like everyone else, but that we try and apply the principles that CISA wants other agencies to model, or our partners out in state, local, territorial, and tribal governments, or critical infrastructure. So I do sit in a unique space, and in recent months, since around February, we've actually brought my office kind of co-dual hatted between the agency overall and directly working for the cybersecurity division. That has enabled some enormous wins, and for my team to better understand what they need to be successful, and also for me to bring some of our ideas in when we're working on binding operational directives or new guidance. We can serve as a proving ground, a test ground, a gut check. When something might come down, I may be like, CIOs aren't going to react really well to that.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing opportunity for us right now at CISA to, I think, lead in a different way. And just going back to that, always a shout out to my team. It's a big team environment. I honestly believe I have the best possible team out there to tackle these problems right now.
Bob Costello of CISA. You can read more about all the items I talked about with him on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, a cyber shot in the arm for the whole federal government. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
Innovation doesn't wait, and neither do we. At Maximus, we solve problems. Streamlining operations, delivering solutions at speed and scale that drive measurable results. From strategy to execution, we simplify complexity, building trust through expertise and innovative technology. Every service, every time. Efficient government delivered. We don't follow innovation. We drive it. Maximus.
Trust nobody and verify everything throughout your environment. So that's very, very important to do. And you're verifying, do I have the right security in my environment? Do I have the technical components built in to actually drive security? And a lot of, I'd say, assessments are what I would call feelings-based assessments. So I will, meet with the stakeholder and say, how is security in your environment? How are you doing, right? And they'll tell you how they feel about their security and where it is. We want to change that to more technical focused assessments where you're actually getting under the hood of those systems, under the hood of those environments, and really evaluating the security as it's being completed on that system.
Welcome back. The Pentagon will start adding cybersecurity maturity model certification language to contracts in November. It's the latest move the executive branch has taken to harden its cyber defenses and the cyber posture of the companies it deals with. Dave Wenegren's Chief Executive Officer of ACT-IAC. It's great to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining me. This is just one example of ways that the department says and the government as a whole says is trying to be innovative about the way that it thinks about cyber and a lot of other issues. What are you seeing as opportunities for organizations to be innovative, not just in cyber, but all across their IT postures?
Yeah, I think innovation is a top topic for the year ahead. For ACT-IAC, we give out innovation awards every year. We have a partnership with the Federal Innovation Council. So when we gather our government executives to opine about what's going to matter in the year ahead, the topics that continually come up, of course, AI and the consolidation efficiency agenda, but innovation. And so there are huge opportunities still to make innovation happen at scale and at speed as we go forward.
What are the opportunities to tie the concept of innovation to mission delivery or something that has to happen back office to enable mission delivery so that folks just don't stay kind of in a brain set where they're just thinking about innovation that doesn't turn into something?
Yeah, that really is the whole key, right? I mean, the administration is focusing a lot on mission outcomes, and that's what we should be focusing on. Where can we use innovation to make a difference with the mission that matters in a measurable way? And I'm a big believer in, you should ride the waves of change. And so, rather than batting your head against the wall, take these topics that are top of mind right now and use them. If AI is a priority, use AI to rapidly accelerate how you're going to bring innovation in. If acquisition reform is a priority, then let's continue to look at, I feel that we're still much more hampered by how we ask for innovation than by who we ask. And so are we doing things in our acquisitions that are encouraging alternative proposals, encouraging innovation, demanding innovation, and then measuring it? Because if we do status quo procurements, we won't do a change that matters. So if you partner those two things up with this idea that you mentioned about do it for the places that matter. We've done enough nibbling around web pages over the years. We need to apply innovation to the major muscle movements of agencies, the major challenges that face the government.
There are success stories out there to that end too. So there are places for agencies to look at their colleagues and peers and see what the best practices are, mimic the successes that have already happened.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's one of the things that ACT-IAC does is, we try to bring government and industry together so we can share. There are definitely examples when you go look at the innovation awards we've given out, there's lots of great examples about how we're using things to change the way we respond to disasters and how we do learning and how we do all sorts of mission operations. But there's also still a lot of opportunity to use the commercial sector. There are commercial best practices that we could adopt more rapidly in government. And part of the sort of FAR 2.0 work that the government's embracing is, let's do more commercial contracting, more performance-based contracting, more opportunities to bring in these commercial best practices.
You talk to folks on both the government side and the industry side of that equation. Is the government listening when the administration says commercial first? And does industry get a sense that government is listening to the commercial first concept?
Yes, I think that it's with every change initiative. There are pockets of enthusiasm and pockets of less enthusiasm, right? But I do think we're starting to see that turn. Certainly, the work that the administration is focusing on about OneGov and FAR 2.0 are laser-like focused on this idea about you got to stop doing status quo procurements, right? That you got to do more commercial contracting, more mission-based, outcome-based. Can we measure it? right? Can we do it quickly? All those things are the tenets that industry wants to hear government say they're going to do.
Everything that we've talked about in this conversation is on the table at Imagination ELC. It's about a month away. I'm excited to see you there this year. I've had to miss the last couple, and I will be there this year. What do you want me and everybody else that goes to take away from ELC 2025?
Well, we are delighted, number one, that you're coming back, and we encourage all of your audience to come and be a part of the conference too, because there has never been a time when it's been more important to know what agencies are focusing on and what changes are going to take place as we build the agenda for the future. And so you will hear about all the topics we talk about today, the consolidation initiatives, acquisition reform, bringing innovation to government, AI. So come and be a part of the adventure.
I will see you there. Thank you very much for joining me today. You can read more about all the issues Dave and I talked about on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the Army's intelligence operation hits the Innovation Easy button. FedGov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back.
AI, ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning, is really going into every aspect of the warfighter. Weapon systems, sensors, the way we process command and control information, the way we identify targets, the way we gather intelligence, all of it is happening much more efficiently due to the use of AI, ML.
We're quickly getting to a point where AI is scraping AI-generated content. So I call this the Whitaker effect. Why do I call it the Whitaker effect? There's a family in West Virginia, two identical brothers, married, and said, you know what, let's just keep it amongst our circle. Two identical brothers, identical twins, and their children's married. Then their children's married, and within 3 or 4 generations, they had horrific medical conditions. We're getting to a point where, because AI is consuming so much of the generated content and learning from it, we're learning AI-generated content that AI is learning that creates content. It's inbred.
Welcome back. The Army's Directorate for Strategy and Transformation inside the Army Intel Corps may be a new office, but its work isn't new. The Directorate succeeds the ISR Task Force. Andrew Evans was the leader of the ISR Task Force. He's now the director of the Directorate. At the AFCEA and INSA Intelligence and National Security Summit, I asked him why the Army's intel operations needs to innovate.
I don't think it's a mystery if you look at any news or you look around the world, even look in your own neighborhoods, that this world is an increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous place. And intelligence professionals have a key role to play in that. And our role is to create clarity for decision makers, because at the end of the day, what we deliver is advantage in their decision making so that we can make a decision faster than our adversary may need to make a decision. And that's what's going to save lives for us down the road. And so our role is providing innovative capabilities that help deliver that decision advantage, right? So my boss, General Tony Hale, is a forward-thinking strategist in the way he views this, and he knows that we have 4 key questions that we have to answer as intelligence professionals, and our innovation work has to support answering those questions. So those questions are really very simple. Who do we think that we're going to fight? Where do we think that we're going to fight? When do we think this fight might occur? And then when we get into a fight, and we hope to not have to do that, but if we have to get into a fight, what type of fight might that look like? What will the adversary be, capable of doing? How are they arraying their forces? So those 4 simple questions are intelligence questions. And so if you want to be lethal, which is what happens at the very end of that equation, intelligence is really what drives that lethality. So this idea of intelligence or lethality starts with intelligence is something it's really important for the department, because we're the foundation on which we can have lethal action or non-lethal, if that were the case, to inform that decision that the commander needs to make. Now, innovation is the way in which you deliver on that strategy. And so early in the process, we stood up something called the Army ISR Task Force. I had an opportunity to lead that organization, and the idea was that we would begin to refine requirements for system performance to really give those soldiers that are the leading edge the tools that they needed to answer those key questions. But the task force itself, and the nature of a task force, is very sort of temporary, right? It's this idea that you're going to solve something and then you'll dissolve. But transformation and staying ahead of an adaptive threat is not necessarily something that you just solve and you're forever done, right? Transformation is something iterative, it's something continuous. And so my boss, again, as a sort of a strategist and a forward-leaning thinker in the space, said we can't take this role of transformation and say it's done, we've completed it, high five, let's move on. Because he sees the world, he understands the threats, and he understands how quickly they're adapting and evolving. And so he wanted to institutionalize this role of transformation. So this year, under all the mandates that we have received from the department and from the Army leaders about workforce optimization and how we really create war-winning capabilities, we really streamline what it is we're doing from a staff. He is hyper-focused on ensuring that what we don't lose is the vision for war-winning readiness and lethality. And so that's what we've done. We've created a new directorate inside the G2 that is focused exclusively on delivering transformation capability, for Army intelligence, help us to answer those 4 questions, and then building this strategy by which we all orient our efforts. And we call it the North Star, sort of you got to know where you're going, right? All roads have to lead somewhere. And so this team, again, I'm quite honored to have a chance to do this. And I believe that my core mission on behalf of my boss is just to help us set what that North Star would look like. He's going to give us his vision. We have to put it into action, drive us towards that North Star, and deliver innovative capabilities that help us answer those questions.
Did you learn a list of things in the process of working through the task force that you're now applying, or did you just codify or confirm things that you already knew or suspected you're now you're now manifesting through the office?
We in the world of transformation, I think that every day you wake up is a new day and a new opportunity to learn something, and so we are continuously learning. It's one of the mandates I have for my team is that we will remain agile, right? Because what we will always remain as intelligence professionals is anchored in the threat. Right, it is the threat that drives our outcomes. We have a certain way that we might think something should happen, but we have to watch the landscape. We have to understand what's happening, and we have to be responsive to that. And so we're taking some of the lessons that we've learned in the early years of the ISR task force in terms of what it means to partner broadly and how you do that successfully. We can't build a monolithic empire of only similar thinkers. You have to have lots of folks that come in and contribute to that space that give you alternate perspectives, perhaps. And so we're doing that. We're building teams of people. We're collecting perspectives. We're collecting technological experts in this space. And together, in partnership with all of the other people in this space, our proponent out at Fort Huachuca and the deep thinking they do about the future of our MI Corps, our material developers out there in the world of the Secretariat for Acquisitions, partnering broadly with all of these folks to deliver those war-winning capabilities.
One of the things that's striking to me, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was struck by the fact that you mentioned acquisition a moment ago, and how my takeaway was that that's a really important component of transformation in the Army. And I'm not sure that's something that's been the case historically in the 15 or 20 years that I've been covering these issues inside the military services, is that acquisition is so closely tied to transformation efforts the way that you and your colleagues are doing it.
Acquisition is where the rubber meets the road, right? You have to be able to develop, build, and then eventually field and scale capability. And that occurs through the relationships that we have with our acquisition professionals. We have some challenges culturally, and our secretary is very focused. He's laser focused on ensuring that when we deliver war-winning capabilities, we don't also say, you know what, I could do better for you, but I have this process by which I have to work through, and the process is unresponsive to your needs. Yeah. So I apologize that I can't deliver lethality. He's not going to let that happen, and rightly so. Yeah. Right? And so we're going to stay focused on soldier capabilities, what soldiers need. We're going to enable the acquisition community to use the authorities that they've been given to deliver that capability at speed and scale. And then our chief and our secretary say we're going to start with soldier design in this process too. So one of the things that I like to tell people is that you can build a capability in a lab, and that feels like a promise to people. But if you put it in the dirt with soldiers, that's real progress for the United States Army. So we're starting with soldiers. We're asking them, what do you need to do your job? We're pairing engineers, material developers with them in the field, and we're accelerating capabilities as a result.
We have less than a minute left, but when you frame it that way, then it makes sense, where I think a lot of people were confused. Why is Army Futures Command combining with TRADOC? But when you talk about it from the context of how you build a soldier, it makes a lot more sense, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's this hyper focus, I think, at times on what we call the big M, which is the material solution. But a material solution is a tool, but the employment of the tool is what makes a force lethal, all right? So we can't forget that there's a doctrine aspect, there's the way you organize around that, there's the way you train against that. It's how your leaders conduct command and control over that. There's this, we call it the .mil PF spectrum, right? We focus a lot on the material solution in the government. I don't know that that's where we need to spend our time. Technicians and technical experts will solve the material thing with soldiers helping inform what that needs to be. But how we employ that becomes much, much more important, especially in this volatile world that we described.
Andrew Evans of Army Intel's Directorate for Strategy and Transformation. You can read more about the Directorate on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. The director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency says today's the golden age for GeoInt. Vice Admiral Frank Whitworth was my guest for a plenary session at the INSA Summit recently. You can listen to that conversation on the Fed Gov Today podcast this week. You get the 3-part series with Admiral Whitworth on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts, and always on demand at fedgovtoday.com. Fed Gov Today TV is back in a moment.
Before we even as industries start to develop these new cloud applications or frameworks, really need to understand the security profiles and protocols of the actual agency so that there's clear roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities. That was not happening in the past. We were kind of two different silos going at it a different way. You get to the ATO, and all of a sudden it's not compliant, right? So we're finding now that this partnership, but we had to come to the table with our expertise and be willing to share some of the threats that we're seeing even on our own internal networks or, and systems like that. So I think it's come a long way.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, the ACT-IAC Cybersecurity Summit's coming next Thursday, October 9th. You'll meet leaders from DHS, HHS, the Justice Department, and more agencies. It's at the Carasoft Conference and Collaboration Center in Reston. You can read more about it and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning with Pavan Padugu, the Chief Information Officer at the Transportation Department. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today.